All right, so this is the interaction stations worksheet that I want you to work on. Now in class, at the back of the classroom, the stations are set up. So if you kind of want to take a look at it, but make sure that you put the materials back, and please make sure to respect the materials. All right, so we are going to be taking a look at something called contact interaction, and that's just really the contact between two objects. And I want to emphasize it's only two objects interacting that results in a compression, a stretch, or a shear. So the compression interaction would look something like a push. You're pushing things together, or you're stretching. So then that would be a pull. And then this part right here, shear, that's kind of like two things sliding against each other, okay, or a rub against each other. And so for each of these stations, you're going to make a claim about one of the contact interactions that's happening, and you're going to identify the two objects that are interacting and where they're occurring, and then the evidence for the type of their interaction. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one. This is going to be the object that's suspended by two strings. And so we see that this is, there is a couple strings here. And so we'll just go ahead and label this one as string 1. And we'll call this one string 2. And we can take a focused look at maybe the interaction between string 1 and the object, right? So this one is just called object. Okay. So string 1 and string 2 are not touching, okay? But string 1 and the object are touching, so we'll focus on that interaction right there. And you can see that it's like tied on to the object. All right, so we are going to say that the interaction is happening between string 1 and object. And where is this interaction happening? It is where there's a stretch, or not, sorry. Well, I kind of give that one away. So there's a stretch happening. Okay, so stretch, that's happening. And where it's happening is where they meet. And the evidence that there is a stretch happening is when we can see along the string that it is what we might say is taut. Okay, so there's like a little tightness that we can feel when we're holding this up. We can also see that the object feels different, right? So when we put this down, the string kind of changes shape. So the string changes shape when object is resting on something else. All right, so then what you want to do is go ahead and add some other stuff if you see other things that are happening at this station. Okay. So that is object suspended by two strings. All right, so we'll go to, let's go to this one. Object being pushed across a brush. All right, so here we have our object. Okay, and our brush is underneath the object, and we're going to push the object in this general direction. Okay, so we're pushing the object in that direction. We see the brush interacting, right? So at this point right here, there is some sort of interaction. And so we'll just say the two objects would be the object and brush. Okay. And we see the interaction where they meet. Okay. So at this point, at where they meet, there's the interaction. And because we're pushing the object across the brush, there is a shear type of interaction that's happening. Okay, so shear. And the shearing is kind of like when you are like grazing something, right? Like if you are walking along the wall and your arm is grazing the wall. So that's that kind of shear, or like scissors that slide against each other. And our evidence that there is some sort of shearing happen is that the bristles are moving back, right? The bristles are moving in the direction that the object is being pushed. So we see the bristle movement. Okay. All right. So that is for the object that's being pushed across the brush. Let's go ahead and go to the object that's suspended by two rubber bands. Is there a compression? So are things being pushed together? Is there a stretch? Do we see anything like maybe expanding or I guess stretching, for lack of better terms? And shear, are there things maybe sliding against each other? All right. And so I know it's a little hard to see, but there is only that. So this rubber band, we'll call this rubber band 2. Okay, so rubber band 2 is happening with an interaction with this object only on this side. Okay, and rubber band number 1, there's an interaction happening on this side of the object. Okay. And so, kind of like the string, I think I've heard a lot of you say that this was the stretch. Okay. And the two objects that are involved in this, okay, will be rubber band number 2, or let's go with rubber band number 1 this time. So rubber band number 1 and the object. All right, so rubber band number 1 is attached to the stand right here, but this is not the interaction that we're talking about. So we're going to erase that. Rubber band number 2 is attached to this object, okay, but that's also not the interaction that we're talking about. We are talking about specifically the interaction between rubber band number 1 and this object, okay? So again, we'll say that the interaction is happening where they meet, the point where they meet, and the evidence that we see is the rubber band has some tightness, right? So it's like from here to here, it looks like it's being stretched. We see that rubber band is taut. Okay. We also see that the object, if you lift the object, right, if you support the object from the bottom, so if you put your hand right here and you lift the object, we can see that the rubber band would change shape. All right, so I mean, if you have other things to add, you should definitely add that. Okay. And let's move to the buggy spinning tires on a brush. So you're going to take the buggy and you're going to put it on top of the brush. And in this case, the buggy's wheels are moving in this direction, right? So the buggy's wheels are moving in that direction. And we see that the bristles are, the bristles are doing something different. Okay, the bristles have this kind of motion. So first they were straight, right? We can see that the bristles, excuse me, the bristles that are not interacting with the tire are just straight up. But the bristles that are underneath the tire kind of have this slant to them. And like the object being pushed across the brush, that's a shear. And the objects that we'll say would be maybe the tire and brush. And we'll say the interaction is happening where they meet or where they touch. Now, the evidence of that is the bristles. Okay, we see that the bristles are moving. All right, so that is the buggy spinning tires on a brush. And next is, lastly, is this, the object that's supported by a foam. Okay, and so we'll say this is foam number 1. And we'll say this is foam number 2. All right, so foam number 1, we see that the outline of the foam number 1, and then the object is kind of like pressing into the foam. And the same thing for foam number 2. We see the outline of the foam, and we see that the object kind of sinks into the foam, right? And so we'll take a look. You can choose which foam you want to look at, okay? I'll say foam number 1. And it is being pushed down, right? So foam number 1, well, I guess, and the object that are interacting, there's some sort of pushing that's happening. Now, if you chose foam number 2, the pushing would be, kind of like more down, and foam number 1's pushing's kind of more to the side. All right. But at the same time, where they meet or the interaction's happening, or where the compression is happening, is where they touch. So where the objects are touching and interacting. And the evidence that we have is that the foam is sinking or changes shape. Okay. And so that is it for our interaction stations right now. So that's the front page, right? So that's the front page, and then this part should be done. And I'm going to make another video for page 2.